Yes. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Invasive Species Center's webinar series. My name is Rito Giri, and I'm the communications intern at the Invasive Species Center, and I'll be your moderator for today. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that the Invasive Species Center honors the long history of the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis Nation peoples on the land now known as Canada and strives to show respect to their ancestors, their communities, and to them individually. We greatly appreciate the significance of the lands, waters, and all living things and offer our gratitude to the indigenous people for their care and teachings about our earth. Our relationships with indigenous communities are important, and we will continue to listen and learn how we can be in a good relationship with indigenous peoples, the land and waters, and all living things and act accordingly. The Invasive Species Center respectfully acknowledges and that our head office is located on the tradition. My bad. The Invasive Species Center is a not-for-profit organization that connects stakeholders, knowledge, and technology to prevent the introduction and spread of invasive species that harm Canada's environment, economy, and society. We've got lots of great invasive species resources on our website and including species profiles, pest management practices, and more. So check us out at www.invasivespeciescenter.ca. You can also sign up on our homepage for our newsletter, bi-weekly media scan, and event invitations, which is where you can hear about our upcoming webinars. Mm. The ISC has launched an invasive species training program that offers virtual courses on topics related to invasive species. We currently have 4 courses available which focus on different forest invasives, but we'll be releasing new content regularly, so stay tuned for that. Make sure to check out our website and sign up to receive updates on when these new courses become available. Before we get started with today's webinar, there are a couple of things I would like to mention. There will be time for questions at the end of the webinar. So if you have a question for the speaker at any time, please type it into the question box and I'll read it to our presenter after the webinar. We ask that you use the Q&A box and not the chat for this purpose. Questions in the chat may go unanswered. If you are having technical difficulties at any time, please type them in the chat box or respond to the email found in your registration, and we will try to resolve it for you. We have also enabled closed captioning, so if you'd like to follow along that way, you can turn that on with the closed caption button on your taskbar. Lastly, there will be a very brief survey following the webinar. If you could take some time to fill it out, we would really appreciate that. Today's webinar is titled An Overview of CFIA's Forest Health Surveys, and I'm pleased to introduce our speaker, Julie Holmes. Julie Holmes joined the CFIA in 2006 and has since had the opportunity to work in a number of roles supporting plant pest surveillance. As the plant health survey biologist for Ontario, Julie works as part of a national team to design, coordinate, and administer the National Plant Health Survey for Canada. She provides training and technical support for operational staff and enjoys the many opportunities for collaboration with partners and stakeholders who share in a goal of protecting Canada's ecosystems from invasive species. This presentation will introduce the audience to CFIA's National Plant Health Surveillance Program and will provide an overview of several forest pests and the CFIA survey methodologies used in Ontario for hemlock lily adelgid, oak wilt, Asian longhorned beetle, and spotted lanternfly. This talk will also emphasize the importance of plant pest outreach and education in monitoring for invasive plants. Thank you, Julie, for joining us today, and I'm ready to pass it on to you.
Okay, I'll just share my screen here, get that up for everyone. And how's that looking?
I'm just
You
trying
see my screen?
to, let me just stop. Yep. Uh,
That work?
yeah, that works. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you again for inviting me to speak today. I'm really excited to be here. The goal of today's session is to introduce you to the CFI's Plant Health Surveillance Program and provide you with an overview of four of the key forest pest surveys for Ontario. So it's a bit of a forest pest sampler pack for you today. I'll be including some information on the biology, distribution, and survey methodologies for each of these pests. And lastly, I'm going to touch on the importance of public pest reports and how outreach and education ties into the work that we do. So who are we? So the Canadian Food Inspection Agency is a science-based regulator. We have a fairly broad mandate. So this spans from food safety, animal health, plant health, and also incorporates international market access. So within plant health, our mandate is to protect Canada's agriculture, forestry, and natural environments from invasive plant pests and diseases to ensure a healthy plant resource base. So one way that we do that is through regulating the movement of plants and plant products, and the Plant Protection Act and regulations provides us with the authority to do this work. So I'll apologize in advance. This is my official slide of acronyms, but they are important ones. They provide a bit more context and help to further explain CFI's role in surveillance of plant pests. So the CFIA is a signatory to the International Plant Protection Convention, or the IPPC. And this is an international treaty that's recognized by the World Trade Organization as the standard-setting body for plant protection. So this treaty aims to harmonize the application of phytosanitary measures and controls through the adoption of a set of standards with the goal of safeguarding global food supply and preventing and controlling the spread of invasive pests through the international trade pathway. So it's sort of like having an international rule book to ensure like an equal playing field between trade partners. So there's no political or economic bias towards any one country. So signatory countries under the IPPC are required to put in place a National Plant Protection Organization, or an NPPO, and they're responsible for coordinating the delivery of the convention. And for Canada, the CFIA fulfills this role. So as an NPPO, our goal is to prevent the import and establishment of invasive species, but you can't entirely stop trade. So by putting in place safeguards, so treatment, for example, treatment requirements prior to entry, prohibiting imported material from infested areas where maybe treatment is not possible. We can then help to reduce the risk of new species introductions through that trade pathway. So if a pest does become established, it's really important that we find it early so we can implement the appropriate control measures to either eradicate or get rid of a pest or to slow the spread of it and protect uninfested areas of Canada. So in order to support the work that CFIA does and to support the IPPC goals, we have an international obligation to conduct surveillance of plant pests, and this is done under the authority, again, of the Plant Protection Act and regulations. So as you're all aware, protecting Canada from invasive species presents significant challenges. So the growing complexity and volume of international trade increases the number of pathways through which pests can enter. So they can often hitchhike on a wide range of goods or even conveyances with the potential to then become established in the Canadian environment. So once established, invasive pests can cause serious environmental and economic impacts over time. Industry often bears the cost of expensive mitigation programs to control the spread, while municipalities and landowners face increased management costs at the property level. Canadian exporters may also be affected, as trading partners could then impose additional controls. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the invasion curve. It shows, it's well documented in the literature, that prevention is the most cost-effective strategy. So we're stopping pests before they even arrive. So the CFIA supports this through regulations and import requirements. Then if a pest does establish, there's typically a limited window where eradication might be possible. So as populations grow, efforts then have to shift to controlling the spread through measures such as ministerial orders, which I'll talk a little bit more in detail about later on. But those are aimed at preventing the human-mediated introductions into uninfested areas of Canada. And then once a pest is widely distributed, control measures may become less effective, and management costs then are the highest. So early detection is therefore critical once a pest is established. So I work within the Plant Health Surveillance Unit, and my team is responsible for designing and overseeing the National Plant Health Survey for Canada. So we have three main goals for pest surveillance. So that includes the detection of new populations of regulated pests, obviously, and then delimiting existing populations of pests. But then thirdly, we're also collecting data to maintain the pest-free status of an area. If we're not actively looking for a pest, we can't really say that Canada is free from it. So these negative data points are very important from a trade perspective, as they often provide the justification that allows us to uphold import requirements on high-risk products coming into the country. So we have a number of different commodity groups that fall within plant protection, so forestry, horticulture, invasive alien species, and field crops, to name a few. So these groups are responsible for balancing that need to prevent the introduction and spread of regulated pests while facilitating international trade. So our survey data helps these groups to support their science-based policy decisions that they have to make, which then govern the requirements for import, export, and domestic movement of goods, including forestry products and things like nursery stock. So I hope that gives you an overview of the CFIA and how surveillance supports the work that the agency does. So now we can move on to the more exciting stuff and talk about insects and plant pathogens. So as this talk focuses on the Ontario perspective, I've picked a few relevant forestry pests on this year's survey plan to highlight today. So this includes hemlock woolly adelgid, oak wilt, Asian longhorned beetle, and spotted lanternfly. So the first survey that I'm going to discuss is hemlock woolly adelgid. So this continues to be a priority here in Ontario. Hemlock woolly adelgid is an aphid-like insect that causes defoliation, twig dieback, and mortality of hemlock. So the insect feeds on the underside of branches near the base of the needles and produces this cottony white egg mass, which looks almost like the ends of Q-tips dotted along the underside of a hemlock stem. So once the eggs hatch, HWA will enter its first nymphal instar, and this is the only mobile stage of hemlock woolly adelgid and is known as the crawler. So these can be naturally spread by wind and animals such as birds. So this pest can also be spread through human-mediated activities, primarily through the movement of infested nursery stock. And this can represent the long-distance dispersal of this pest and is thought to have been the initial pathway of introduction into eastern North America. So HWA was first detected in Virginia in 1951, and since then it's continued to spread throughout the eastern US and is now, unfortunately, established within both Ontario and Nova Scotia here in Canada. So HWA is a parthenogenic insect with 2 successful generations per year here in North America. In its native range, it has the third winged generation that successfully reproduces sexually. Once the nymphs hatch, they're going to crawl to find a suitable spot to feed. And again, that's on the underside of the branch near the base of the needle. And then they'll insert those piercing, sucking mouth parts. And this is where they're going to remain. So they'll feed and develop through 4 nymphal instars in this location before becoming adults and then producing a clutch of eggs within that white woolly egg sac. So one important thing I do want to note is that the Sistens generation is the generation that overwinters. So this generation can produce up to 200 eggs per ovisac, whereas in comparison, the Progrediens generation will produce less. So this is why we time the survey when we do. So that March to May window is the time of year where the egg sacs are going to be kind of the biggest and most plump, making this the best time of year from a detection efficacy standpoint. So the signs and symptoms that we look for during the survey include those white woolly ovisacs that I've already discussed. In the photo there in the top middle, you can see an ovisac where the wool has kind of been teased apart and it's showing the clutch of eggs. They're kind of amber colored oval eggs, as well as the nymphs. So you can see just off to the right, they appear as little pepper-like flecks with a little white halo of wool around the edges. So they're very tiny and very difficult to see. In more heavily infested sites, you might see the presence of wool on the boles of trees that has been dislodged from the canopy, or even on structures like this picnic table. In really high population densities, it's the site here where the picnic table was in a park. You couldn't walk like 2 or 3 feet without seeing wool. It was on the leaf litter, any structure in the park. It was just pretty incredible to see. So as we're walking from tree to tree while conducting our surveys, it seems a bit counterintuitive, but we also keep our eyes on the ground to keep an eye out for infested shoots that may have broken off from the tree canopy that we might not be able to see kind of at ground level. And of course, we're looking at the overall health of trees within a stand and prioritize any areas where hosts are showing kind of thinning crowns or have that grayish cast and discolored foliage. So in terms of distribution in Canada, this map shows the regulated areas where HWA has been confirmed and movement controls have been placed through the establishment of a ministerial order. So this is current as of August 21st of 2025. So I just wanted to use this as an opportunity to highlight some of the key dates to give you a better picture of how HWA has progressed in Eastern Canada over the years. So in 2012, the first detection in Eastern Canada was reported to CFIA on nursery stock in a residential tree in Etobicoke. This was on a couple of two different residential properties where the trees were removed and destroyed. So we caught it early and we got lucky. So in 2013, HWA was then detected through CFI surveys within a natural area in Niagara Falls, Ontario. So it was detected on a single tree, which was removed and incinerated on site. And then follow-up surveys in 2014 and 2015 then identified a single positive tree at the exact same location in each of those 2 years, which were also removed and destroyed. So then over to the east in 2017, HWA was detected in a natural area reported by a field technician doing work on power lines. Follow-up surveys confirmed that HWA was widespread across 5 counties in southwestern Nova Scotia, and now it has since spread to 9 different counties there. So fast forward to 2019, and again, HWA has reared its head at the same location in Niagara Falls and was detected during the annual delimitation surveys that were being conducted as follow-up to those initial finds. So as this was a natural area site and the infestation wasn't directly associated with the movement of nursery stock, we didn't really think that we were that lucky to find, the single infested tree where HWA just happened to land and establish in 2013 there. So despite the fact that we were conducting branch sampling and we worked with the landowner to deploy climbers as part of our delimitation surveys, we really did think that it had to be somewhere else at that site. The property does span quite a large length along the Niagara River, and we just weren't able to find it until 2019. So this is a significant find in that it represented the first find in Ontario that was clearly well established, and we knew based on the input from our technical advisory committee and subject matter experts, it wouldn't be feasible to eradicate. So this did mark a bit of a turning point for hemlock woolly adelgid in Ontario. So following that find in Niagara Falls, in 2019, we had another detection in Wainfleet, Ontario, as a result of our CFI surveys. It was then detected on numerous contiguous properties in Fort Erie in 2021. And then in the years following, there were numerous detections across the Niagara region as a result of CFI surveys, as well as reports from conservation authorities, members of the public, and both provincial and federal partners. So in 2022, a population was then found just north of the Lake Ontario within Grafton by CFS researchers. So this was a bit of a jump as we anticipated finding it in areas kind of closer to the known infestations. And then in 2023, HWA was then detected in Hamilton and Haldimand counties, followed by Norfolk County and the city of Toronto. And these were all based on reports from land managers and governmental partners. So that brings us to the current state of affairs. So we have that contiguous regulated area in the Niagara region, city of Hamilton and Haldimand, and then the township of Alnwick-Haldimand in Ontario and the contiguous area in Nova Scotia. I should note here, there are some additional counties where HWA has been detected, but have not yet been incorporated into the ministerial order. So instead, these infested locations are regulated at the property level by way of notices of prohibition of movement to prevent the movement of infested host material from these properties. Also, as some of you may have noticed, the large blob of yellow to the west. I just wanted to take the opportunity to highlight that there are populations of hemlock woolly adelgid that are found in Western Canada, where it's most likely been present for thousands of years and is not a particularly destructive pest just due to natural enemies and host resistance. So on to the surveys. So CFI surveys are conducted primarily between April and May, when our detection efficacy is going to be the greatest. And we target areas at natural risk of spread, so your hemlock forest stands, green spaces, and urban parks. And we prioritize sites within 100 kilometers of known infestations of both Canada and the US. So we also look at nurseries importing hemlock material from the US just to cover that human-mediated movement pathway as well. And since birds can effectively transport crawlers, migratory flight routes, as well as proximity to waterways, are also considered when we're selecting our sites. So for the survey itself, a site is broken down into 4 separate quadrants. And then within each quadrant, 25 trees are randomly selected and examined following the Costa and Ogden methodology. So at each tree, the underside of 2 branches, one on each opposing side of the tree, is examined for signs and symptoms of hemlock woolly adelgid. So this year, surveys were completed at 79 sites across Ontario. We had a number of detections within the Niagara region, as well as the city of Hamilton, which now, as of August 2025, fall under that ministerial order. So outside of this area, there were 2 detections in the city of Toronto, and to date, we have 6 detections within Norfolk County. So all of which have resulted from reports from the public, municipalities, or other governmental departments like CFS, which really highlights the value of pest reports. And as I mentioned earlier, we continue to collect survey data in support of future updates to that ministerial order. And until then, all positive locations are managed at the site level with notices of prohibition of movement. So next we have oak wilt, which is a vascular disease caused by the fungus Brezziella fagacearum. All oak species are susceptible, but species within the red oak group are the most susceptible, and they can die within as little as weeks after infection, which is pretty alarming. So this is why we focus on red oaks for our detection surveys. And for the purposes of this talk, I'm focusing on signs and symptoms specifically within that red oak group. So once a tree becomes infected with the fungus, the onset of symptoms is fairly quick, and it's typically followed by mortality of the tree. So the pest was first documented in Wisconsin in the 1940s, and it's currently found within 24 US states. And as many of you already know, this pest was identified in Ontario, Canada for the first time in 2023. So I just wanted to quickly go over the disease cycle of this pest. So once the fungal spores have been introduced into the system, the fungus develops on the outer sapwood of the tree, causing the host to develop these tyloses and gums. So this blocks the transport system and restricts the flow of nutrients and water in the affected tissues. So leaf symptoms then start to develop, and the tree effectively starts to wilt, which is where the common name oak wilt comes from. So this disease will progress and eventually lead to the death of the tree. Once the tree is dead, it can produce spore-bearing mats, which form underneath the bark, and can also produce longitudinal cracking over top. And there are 2 ways that this disease can then transfer to a new host. So there's overland spread and root graft spread. So overland spread involves nididulid and oak bark beetles, which are both considered vectors of this disease. So they can transmit the fungus through feeding and breeding activities on infected hosts. Nididulid beetles, they're attracted to that fruity smell of the fungal mats, and they're also attracted to volatile chemicals from healthy wounded trees. So they can be feeding on a pressure pad and then can transfer these sticky spores to fresh wounds on healthy trees and start new infection centers that way. Now, in terms of root graft spread, obviously that takes place underground between the root systems. So the roots of infected trees will graft with the roots of nearby healthy trees and then transfer that fungus. So once oak wilt is introduced into an area, root grafting typically accounts for the majority of local spread. And this is why you can often see like pockets of infestation stemming from an infected tree. So in addition to natural spread, there's also the human-mediated component to consider. So long-distance spread might occur through the movement of infested wood products, such as firewood and logs. And this is especially true for material with bark attached, which might contain fungal mats, which could then attract insect vectors. So at a more local level, the potential for spread is increased through tree wounding activities. So things like pruning and construction, which might cause open wounds on healthy trees. So this leaves trees susceptible to the introduction of the fungus from visiting insect vectors, which might be carrying fungal spores. So conducting these activities between the beginning of April to the end of October can increase the potential for local spread, as during this time frame, insect vectors may be active, and there's the potential for fungal mats to be present during this window. So for this reason, we really advise against pruning of oak trees outside of the no-risk window. So if at all possible, please do not prune your oaks during this time. The highest risk time of year to prune is between April 1st and July 31st, just due to the increased potential of fungal mats and insect activity. If you absolutely have to prune during this window, do your best to do so after August 1st, and also be sure to apply a latex-based paint just to act as a barrier on that wound. So the signs and symptoms that we're looking for when we're completing our surveys include leaf discoloration, where individual leaves turn progressively bronze. So the color change will move inward from the leaf margins, starting at the tip of the leaf and progressing towards the midrib and then into the petiole. The border between that healthy and discolored tissue will be very distinct and sharp. The tree itself will start to exhibit this top-down leaf wilting and bronzing of the foliage, starting at the top of the crown and tips of the branches before rapidly spreading through the entire tree. Premature leaf drop will also begin at the crown of the tree, and leaves can be cast rapidly as the infection progresses. It's really not uncommon for infected trees to be like almost entirely defoliated within a period of a few weeks of symptom onset. So vascular staining may also be present, as shown in the photo there on the bottom left. So there's these dark concentric rings that can be seen in the cross-section when we take samples of symptomatic branches. And lastly, after a tree has died, fungal mats or pressure pads may start to form underneath the bark. So as they mature, they're exerting an outward pressure on the bark, also why they're referred to as pressure pads, which then causes longitudinal bark cracks to form on top. So just another view of a bark crack in the image on the left with the fresh pressure pad that's formed underneath, shown in the photo to its right. So pressure pads can sometimes occur in autumn, the year that the tree dies, but more commonly it's going to be in the spring the following year. So I just wanted to say it's a good point to remember if you're out in the field trying to diagnose a tree and the tree is still in leaf, but you're seeing longitudinal bark cracks, those aren't going to be forming due to oak wilt if the tree is still alive and in leaf. One other kind of neat thing to note, the fungal mats emit this fruity smell, which a lot of people liken to juicy fruit gum, which I really do think it smells like that. Some people also describe it as more of an apple cider vinegar smell. So just to familiarize everyone with the previous infestations, there were 3 localized populations of oak wilt identified in Southern Ontario in 2023. So the first being the find in Niagara Falls, which represented the first Canadian record of oak wilt. We were alerted to this find in May by an arborist who was suspicious of bark cracking on 3 standing dead oaks at a private residence. And then within a span of a week or 2, a second report came from a homeowner in the township of Springwater who was concerned about bronzing and crown decline on the red oak, which was then confirmed positive by CFIA. And then finally, we received a 3rd report from a field practitioner concerned about bronzing and crown decline on a single red oak, again confirmed positive for oak wilt. So all in the span of about a month, we had 3 isolated finds of oak wilt, which was a first for Canada. So in response to these finds, CFIA initiated regulatory controls, so restricting the movement of any host material off each of the sites to mitigate that human-mediated risk of spread while we determine the extent of the infestation. Visual surveys were completed within a 400-meter radius of each positive site, where inspectors visually assessed all species of oak for signs and symptoms of oak wilt. Symptomatic material was then sampled and then sent for analysis to CFIA's pathology lab. So physical controls were applied at each site through tree removals. So in addition to positive trees, we also ordered the removal of healthy trees falling within the control zone. And in all, we had 16 trees removed across 3 sites. So throughout the response, we utilized partnerships and the available technical expertise to ensure that current science and lessons learned from US counterparts were guiding that response process. And luckily for us, we had the Oak Wilt Technical Advisory Committee, which was established well in advance of the 2023 fines, with the goal of coordinating a multi-government information sharing network and preparing for the arrival of oak wilt in Canada, given its close proximity to the Canadian border. So this TAC worked collaboratively with other contributors, and they developed the Oak Wilt Response Framework for Canada. And this document outlines comprehensive measures for response to that pest and draws on the collective experience of a multitude of organizations and partners. And this also included Michigan and New York State, who have dealt with this pest firsthand. So this was an invaluable resource used to guide the response back in 2023, and it enabled us to move forward with an effective and coordinated response in a relatively quick manner. And of course, during this response itself, partnerships were crucial. So from working with municipalities to complete removals, field practitioners and members of the public who reported suspect pest finds, and then partners who provided science advice, shared surveillance data, and promoted oak wilt awareness through their respective networks. So this work certainly couldn't have been done as effectively without the many levels of collaboration that took place. And I feel like this is a really good example, of the various roles that each group has to play and the importance of collaborative partnerships in the pest response process. So I feel like oak wilt is also a good pest to highlight the regulatory tools that can be used in the pest response process. So just wanting to highlight a few examples here. As all of the pests are that I'm talking about today, oak wilt is designated as a regulated plant pest under the Plant Protection Act and regulations. So this allows us to implement import requirements on high-risk regulated materials to prevent entry of the pest into Canada. Then under this authority, there are also several domestic tools that can be utilized to prevent the movement of the pest within Canada. So for example, under Section 5 of the Act, anyone who becomes aware of a regulated plant pest in an area where it's not known to occur is required to notify the CFIA. The CFIA then has the authority to carry out plant pest surveys and verify any suspect pest reports. And that includes both public and privately owned lands, allowing us to enter onto properties and collect samples as we need to. So if oak wilt is confirmed on a property, we then have the authority to place regulatory controls, either at the site level through a notice of prohibition of movement, or at a larger scale to prevent the movement of potentially infested host material from that property. So luckily it wasn't the case with oak wilt, but say if there were no effective controls available, or if it was determined that the pest was just so widespread and eradication wasn't feasible, as we see with HWA, then we might consider regulating on a broader scale through a use of a ministerial order to protect other areas where the pest is not yet established. Okay, so for our surveillance, for oak wilt, our program can be broken down into two different types of surveys, so delimitation and detection, each of which have very different goals. So delimitation surveys are initiated in the year following the application of physical controls at each site where oak wilt was detected. And this is with the goal of verifying the efficacy of the control efforts that were applied. So those removals. Visual delimitation surveys are then carried out within a 1.6 kilometer radius of the infection centers, and then at varying levels of intensity in relation to the initial finds. So trees nearest to the infection center, obviously at higher risk. So all oak species within a 100-meter radius of the infested sites are visually assessed each year. And then as we move further away from the initial infested sites, we then prioritize inspections of species in the red oak group, and then we alternate target quadrants every other year. So oak wilt is considered to be under eradication in Canada, and delimitation surveys will be ongoing at each site until we're able to obtain 5 consecutive years of negative survey data before we can consider declaring eradication. So as a complement to the delimitation surveys, we also continue to complete our annual detection surveys across the broader landscape of Eastern Canada. And the goal of these surveys is to monitor for new populations of this pest. So we focus on high-risk pathways of introduction of the pest where oak wilt might have been introduced through human-mediated means. So for example, campgrounds and mills importing oak logs from the US. And then we also incorporate sites where positive signals have been identified through provincial eDNA trapping work that's been completed by Sharon Reed's group. So because eDNA can be detected in a system, even at low levels, it's the hope that these detections can then help to inform our traditional ground surveys. So surveys take place between July and mid-August, where inspectors make a stand-level assessment for those pockets of decline that I talked about earlier, before visually inspecting 50 red oak trees for signs and symptoms of oak wilt. Again, sampling any symptomatic material and submitting this to the CFIA pathology lab for testing. So this year we completed surveys at 104 sites across Ontario, and great news, no new detections of oak wilt. So we've now obtained our second year of negative survey data. Definitely something to celebrate. So next I'm going to talk about Asian longhorn beetle. This is an invasive wood-boring insect native to Asia, which is known to attack and kill healthy hardwood trees. This is why it represents such a threat to both urban as well as natural forests in North America. So this is yet another pest which is capable of human-mediated spread over longer distances through the movement of infested wood products. It's also passively spread through hitchhiking on vehicles, which added a different level of complexity to the response process during the Ontario Asian longhorn beetle response. So there are currently no natural controls available for this pest, and it is present and currently under eradication in both the United States as well as Europe. And the good news story is that Asian longhorn beetle was eradicated from Canada following a very intense eradication program in both Toronto, Vaughan, and the Mississauga areas. So Asian longhorn beetle typically requires 1 to 2 years to complete its development from egg to adult. In the GTA, we were seeing with the slightly cooler climate, most beetles required 2 years to successfully complete their life cycle. So eggs are laid under the bark from July to mid-October and typically hatch within 10 to 15 days of being laid. The larvae then begin feeding on the outer surface of the sapwood, creating feeding galleries under the bark. And after feeding for several weeks or months, they'll eventually bore a tunnel into the heartwood. And upon reaching maturity, they'll create a pupal chamber near the terminal end of the feeding tunnel. So this insect typically overwinters in the larval stage, and then pupation occurs between June to August, after which adults emerge from the tree. Adult beetles will then undergo a maturation feeding period for about 2 weeks, where they feed on leaves and the bark of twigs before mating and egg laying occurs. So characteristics of cerambycid beetles, Asian longhorn beetle has these very strong, heavily sclerotized mandibles. So female Asian longhorn beetle will use these mandibles to chew pits into the bark where then she oviposit or inserts an egg into that bark. So if you look closely, you can actually see the mandible marks along the edges of the pits. So a single egg is laid per pit. And the photo here shows the egg on the underside of the bark. And it looks almost like a grain of arboreal rice with a little bit of discoloration on the underside of the bark. So eggs are white when they're first laid, and then over time they'll turn into a creamy ivory color as it matures. So adult beetles are also using these strong mandibles to create exit holes when the adults emerge following pupation. So those exit holes appear like perfectly round, almost as if someone had taken a drill with a large bit and just drilled into the tree. So these oviposition pits and exit holes are going to be two of the most apparent signs earlier on in an infestation. But additional signs and symptoms include the presence of frass, which almost looks like a shredded wheat cereal. You might also see frothy sap from wounds, tunneling damaged and sloughed off bark as that infestation progresses, and then eventually crown dieback and decline of the tree. And I just wanted to provide you with a short history of Asian longhorn beetle in Ontario. So the first record of an established population in Canada occurred in an industrial park in the Toronto Vaughan area in 2003. So most likely this has been introduced through the imported wood packaging pathway. So after intensive surveys and CFIA was working with many partners on the response, a total of about 30,000 trees were removed over 10 host genera. So the last beetle was detected in December 2007, and following that, annual delimitation surveys then allowed CFIA to declare eradication of the pest in April of 2013, which brings us to Mississauga. So unfortunately, not long after eradication was declared, the RPO in the local Toronto office received an email containing rather disheartening photo taken by a member of the public. As soon as they looked at it, they knew it was Asian longhorn beetle. So following a site visit and sample collection, it was officially confirmed in a new location outside of the original regulated area. So more of a satellite population. Intensive ground surveys were again conducted to determine the extent of the infestation, and based on lessons learned from the initial population, top host species were removed, so about 7,500 trees. So eradication, as I'm sure you can appreciate, required a large amount of resources in collaboration with federal and provincial partners, as well as affected municipalities. Just due to the slower spread of this pest and the fact that we have reliable and systematic survey methodologies for this pest, this remains a success story for all of the partners involved. So the CFIA utilizes a national grid-based detection survey. This was developed by the Canadian Forest Service and was designed to detect a population that is similar in size to the population detected in Toronto Vaughan, which we have demonstrated that we can successfully eradicate. So we focus on major urban centers where the risk of introduction through international wood packaging and that pathway is going to be the greatest. And then we inspect these locations on a 5-year rotation. So we know that if there's a population brewing, we will eventually catch that. A grid is then overlaid across these urban centers, and at each grid point, 30 maple trees or alternate hosts, if maple trees are not present, are inspected with the aid of binoculars. So as oviposition pits can be found both on the lower and upper portions of the tree, depending on population density and the size of the host, the entire tree is visually inspected from the ground at all angles. So in order to cross-utilize resources, this survey has added modules for both citrus longhorn beetle as well as spotted lanternfly. So the biology of citrus longhorn beetle is quite similar to Asian longhorn beetle, except that it creates T-shaped oviposition pits and infests the roots and root collar of the tree. So it can typically be found tunneling in the lower 50 centimeters of the bowl. And then for spotted lanternfly, in addition to maple, inspectors are also examining any tree of heaven on site, and they also scan the environment close to the host trees for signs of spotted lanternfly. So primarily this is going to be egg masses and potentially adults, which might be present at the time of the survey, either on the tree or past first frost, potentially in the leaf litter surrounding the tree. So given the overlap in site types at risk of introduction for spotted lanternfly and across kind of the urban landscape with Asian longhorn beetle, this is a great complement to the summer spotted lanternfly surveys that we conduct, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So this year we completed a total of 722 sites to date. We have a very short window for this survey as it can't be done under wet conditions, as these make detections of signs quite difficult. So we prioritize delivery of this survey on warm and sunny days after leaf off in the fall, and we often run into the winter months to complete delivery by the end of March. So we'll again plan to deliver another 725 sites next year based on the established rotation of our target urban centers. So last, I'm going to talk about the spotted lanternfly, Lycorma delicatula, which is a highly invasive pest causing significant issues in the eastern US. So it's a sap-sucking insect which prefers the invasive tree of heaven, but also feeds on a very broad range of plant species. So this pest has proven to be a serious pest of grapes in the US. So feeding can cause weeping wounds, and the insect also produces a large amount of honeydew, which then provides a substrate for sooty mold to form and grow and can further damage plants. So from an urban perspective, SLF can certainly impact the urban forest, but it also manifests as a nuisance pest to the public, just due to the sheer number of insects that might be present when populations are really high. Additionally, the presence of honeydew that's produced by the insects can attract stinging insects like wasps and yellow jackets and bees. And that resulting presence of sooty mold can also impact enjoyment of the urban environment. So this pest is native to Asia, and it's thought to have first arrived on a shipment of stone as an egg mass. So the egg masses can be laid on a variety of smooth surfaces, so it's certainly not restricted to its host material, and these egg masses are very difficult to detect. So since its introduction into Pennsylvania in 2014, it's steadily continued to spread despite the available management tools that the US has and the many efforts to eradicate and slow the spread of this pest. So this pest is an excellent hitchhiker, and it's highly polyphagous. So it's very difficult to predict kind of how and where they're going to move. It's now established within 19 US states. And while it's not yet established in Canada, it is a matter of when as opposed to if. So spotted lanternfly has one generation per year. Eggs are laid from September to November before overwintering. The egg masses themselves, or even spent egg masses, could be visible year-round. So first instar nymphs emerge as early as April and appear as little black insects with white spots. After hatching, they go in search of a host where they feed using their specialized mouth parts to pierce through plant tissue and feed on the phloem. Fourth instar nymphs may be present between July to September, and adults might be found from July onwards to December or until they're killed off by a hard frost. So first through third nymph instars, so instar nymphs rather, feed on young shoots of perennial and annual plants, while the fourth instar nymphs and adults have much stronger mouth parts and are able to feed directly on older tissue. So the eggs themselves look like little seeds, and they're laid in 4 to 7 vertical rows and contain up to 50 eggs per mass, which you can see in the photos to the upper left there. So they measure about an inch long, and once laid, the female will cover them in this white waxy coating, and they'll turn from this kind of gray putty color to a muddy brown color over time. And then as time goes on, like they really do look like a smear of mud, making detection quite challenging, especially against the backdrop of, the bark of the host trees. So early instar nymphs are approximately a 1/4 inch long, and they have those black bodies with white spots. And then once the insect develops into its fourth and final instar, the insect then takes on that reddish color, and they can measure up to 3/4 of an inch long, so a little bit bigger. Adults are about an inch long and 1/2 inch wide, and they have these really large and showy wings. So the hind wings are red with black and white markings on them. So when they open their forewings, there's that like bright flash of red that appears. So in contrast to the cryptic egg masses, both the fourth instar nymphs and the adults are quite showy. So between, say, July and the first frost is probably going to be the period of time when you're most likely to notice this insect. So I also mentioned the production of honeydew as the insect is feeding. I did get a chance to visit an infestation in Buffalo, New York, and just standing under the tree, it was just like raining down honeydew. It was really neat to see it, but also kind of gross at the same time. But you did see that the nearby foliage was just covered in honeydew as well. And I mentioned before that sooty mold may also develop around infested hosts as a result of the presence of that honeydew. So while I haven't seen this documented in the literature to date, it looks like SLF may be a nocturnal species. So I don't know if I need to point out or not that that was a joke, but in reality, like its showy appearance and presence in urban areas makes it highly visible, and it's a very notable nuisance pest. And it's drawn significant public attention. So it's even appeared on shows like The Tonight Show, The Late Show, SNL, and Jimmy Kimmel Live. So to quote the words of Bowen Yang, "I even look gorgeous dead." So this really is true, as it's kind of such a unique and beautiful insect. So in all likelihood, detection of an established population may very likely come from an observant member of the public who comes across this pest in the urban landscape. So yet another reason to push public outreach so people can recognize the pest and report sightings. So in terms of our surveillance strategy, we target preferred hosts, so including the tree of heaven, as well as grapes, hops, black walnut, maple, and oak. So we focus our survey efforts on high-risk sites and those pathways through which SLF is most likely to be introduced. So that includes the commercial transportation pathways. So you've got your rail yards, border crossings, ports, and rest stops. We also look at forested areas and vineyards adjacent to US infestations. And then we're looking at sites associated with travel or tourism from US visitors where they might have hitchhiked. We also target areas with previous interceptions. So at each site, we're deploying traps that remain in the field from early May to the end of September. And we also complete a visual survey of hosts over a 200-meter span across the site in either July or September. So this past year, we established 26 survey sites within Ontario, and those are denoted by the green triangles and dots on the map there. So I do want to be very clear that to date, we have not detected any established populations of spotted lanternfly here in Ontario, or Canada for that matter. But you will note the various red dots on the map, and these represent sightings and interceptions of adult spotted lanternfly that have been reported to CFIA, either by the public or through CBSA reports. So in all cases, CFIA followed up, and those follow-up activities did not identify any active populations in the immediate surroundings. So for the most part, these reports can be linked to the transportation pathway, as we know spotted lanternfly is an excellent hitchhiker. And fall is typically the time of year where we start to receive, and late summer, where we start to receive an influx of reports of this pest. But this year, we've certainly seen a year-over-year increase in the number of reports received. And we've also seen increases in the number of live interceptions of this pest. And this is predominantly in the Windsor area, which is not too far from an established population in the US. So this is definitely one area to watch. I should also mention that we do publish a list of sightings and interceptions, and that's available on our website. So that ranges from 2022 to present. So please feel free to take a look at that if that's of interest. So spotted lanternfly seems like an excellent segue to highlight the hundreds of pest reports that CFIA receives each year. So we ask that you please report all sightings of suspected regulated pests. Even if you're not 100% sure, or you just like a second opinion, please send it in. It's exactly what we're here for. So photos are really, really important. We use these to determine if a site visit or sampling might be warranted. And I've included a couple of really good photos just as examples here of what you should submit. So you want to include photos showing the entire tree, along with more close-up photos showing the details of any signs and symptoms that you're observing. So photos are great for pests like oak wilt. But of course, if it's like an insect pest that might be mobile, we ask that you please try to secure the specimen for collection by CFIA inspectors. So even something as simple as like putting it into a sealed plastic bag and placing it in your freezer is perfect. There are also a multitude of ways that these reports can be submitted to us. So you can go directly on the CFIA website, or you can go to CFIA's surveillance email account, which is listed here on this slide. You can also reach out to your local CFIA office. And while we prefer direct reports to CFIA, there are also apps like iNaturalist and EdMaps that facilitate easy reporting with the touch of a screen. So we review and respond to all reports that we received, triaging those that might require an on-site visit from our inspectors. So here I've shown a screenshot of some of the reports from Ontario this year that have been received through our surveillance email account. So the majority of pest reports do turn out to be negative, but as you can see from the photos here, some are certainly more concerning than others. So I've got examples from this year from Japanese stiltgrass, spotted lanternfly, hemlock woolly adelgid, oak wilt, and Chinese yam. And don't worry, that oak wilt, that's actually a photo from 2023. I should mention that. We didn't miss one. So even when negative, these pest reports do give us an opportunity to engage with members of the public and then provide additional information and resources. So I also wanted to mention that we have mechanisms in place to monitor the data collected through apps like EdMaps and iNaturalist. So for example, through our AI lab, we've established a daily email alert, providing a summary of the observations that are entered into iNaturalist. So this pulls specific pests based on a pre-established watch list, and then we're scanning these reports on a daily basis. So this further enhances our capacity to respond to sightings of concern in real time as they're reported. So just to show you an example, you can see this hemlock woolly adelgid record for the city of Hamilton. Then you can click on the URL, and that takes us directly to the report, where we can then view photos and obtain location data for the record. While this particular record falls within what's now the regulated area, we've had numerous pest finds as a result of these reports, HWA included, so it's definitely proven to be a valuable tool. So outreach and education plays a critical role in facilitating stakeholder and community awareness to foster cooperation in reporting suspects and also observing movement restrictions. So we work with partners to prioritize training and hands-on workshops for field practitioners. And we also educate other stakeholders and members of the public on how to identify the signs and symptoms of regulated pests, movement restrictions, and the risks associated with moving firewood. Best practices such as pruning windows for oak trees, where to go to access resources, and of course, how to report a suspect find. So we know that outreach is one of the key components to early pest detection, and this has been demonstrated over and over through identification of new populations as a result of these pest reports. So we've seen this with Asian longhorn beetle, emerald ash borer, the finds of HWA this year, and also the 3 finds of oak wilt in Canada. We're certainly no exception to this. So outreach and education really does enhance pest surveillance, and it supports early detection and rapid response to pest incursions. So one initiative I just did want to highlight here are our Asian longhorn beetle simulation sites. So as part of our outreach and education efforts, we've established a number of these sites, which is a concept developed by the Canadian Forest Service in the early days of the ALHB response. So we create an artificial infestation using a drill, a Dremel, and some dental scrapers, and then we simulate what an Asian longhorn beetle infestation would look like. So this allows the users of the site to establish a search image for the oviposition pits and exit holes in the hopes of increasing detection efficacy while we're out conducting our surveys. So the photos shown here actually from a site I recently established with the town of Bancroft. So they're using this site and a local school board there. So they're using this site as part of the local school curriculum to provide hands-on learning opportunities in the environmental field. Excuse me. We've also established single outreach trees to increase awareness of this pest in high-risk urban areas. So we're always open to establishing new sites where there's a need. So please reach out if you're interested. So we also have a number of resources available to you, including documents such as the Oak Wilt Response Framework for Canada and the HWA Management Plan for Canada. Although I do want to mention that there's an updated HWA Management Guide led and developed by CFS, which is a more recent publication, and that's available on the Invasive Species Center website. So I highly recommend you take a look at that. The Invasive Species Center website itself has a number of useful resources and has a wealth of information on invasive pests. So I always tell people that I come across in the field, it's kind of like a one-stop shop for pest information, and I highly encourage everyone to access that webpage as well. So all our external survey protocols are available on the ISC website. So if you are conducting surveys, you can access the protocols there, and please let us know. This helps us to coordinate efforts, fill coverage gaps, and avoid duplication. And we encourage everyone to either reach out and let us know about that or report your results directly through the Survey 123 app. So Survey 123, we have pest-specific survey forms available within the app, and these just capture the key details of the survey, which then allow us to include your data in our annual reports to highlight our partner contributions. So if you need access or have any questions, please feel free to reach out anytime. And we also have a number of outreach materials available. So if these would be of use for, say, in-house training or any outreach work that you might be doing, please don't hesitate to reach out with a request. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions, and you're also more than welcome to reach out to me, after today's presentation if you have any questions. My email's there, and with that, just thanks again for the invitation to speak today.
Thank you, Julie, for giving us this wonderful presentation. We don't have a lot of time for questions, but I will read out a couple. So I have one in the chat. Can you combine monitoring for multiple pests or not, due to the timing window of each pest being different?
That's a good question, and that's something that we certainly strive to do. I did talk about our Asian longhorn beetle survey, which has the added modules for citrus longhorn beetle and spotted lanternfly. So that's one pest where kind of the host material, there's some overlap, as well as the site types, there's some overlap, and the survey timing. So that's one area where we've been able to do that successfully.
Uh, does the CFIA currently have eDNA traps set up at border hotspots slash sites for potential new detections?
We currently do not. I know there are a couple of different eDNA research projects going on right now. And I know there's one, the HWA Monitoring Network eDNA that's being delivered by the Invasive Species Center. So that's more of like a community science and outreach piece. So that's not delivered specifically by the CFIA.
Okay.
And then there's also the work that the Oak Wilt work that's being done by Sharon Reed's group with the OMNRF, whatever iteration of that.
I have another question. So,
Mhm.
what are some key strategies in mobilizing the public for detection for oak wilt? Many members struggle with tree ID, and Nittilides cracks are not as noticeable as SLF or ALHB.
Some strategies that we have used, like social media postings, things that can grab people's attention. We've done a lot of workshops. So with the field practitioner community, that's one that we target. We've also done kind of like walk and learn sort of sessions with the public. And oak wilt is definitely part, like the oak wilt content is definitely part of that. Kind of just trying to get that hands-on learning opportunity to get people engaged and involved. And then we also have our outreach products. So we have pest cards, which are quite handy. I know our inspection staff have those. They're kind of like just a small little credit card sized card, for lack of a better word. But they have like all of the identification information, the symptoms and signs that you want to look for, as well as who to contact. So those are handy to give out to members of the public just so they have something to look at and some information at hand.
Julie, could we look at the slide again where you showed how people could report SLF? Yes.
Absolutely.
Some people are interested in seeing that slide.
Let me go back here. Whoop. There we go.
There you go.
So yeah, we have our QR code there. So even if you were to Google search CFIA report a pest, that should take you to the web page there. We've got our surveillance our surveillance email address there that if you want to try to jot that one down. The
Mhm.
QR code is probably your easiest bet. And all else fails, you can contact your local inspection office as well. So we have them across Canada.
Someone wants to know if those infected oak trees have either been mulched, chipped, or burned.
They were all destroyed on site, so they were removed and chipped on site.
Okay. Someone is interested in knowing how to get invasive species fact sheets, the ones that you showed.
Oh, so fact sheets. So I
Mhm.
will say the Invasive Species Center website has a number of different, like you can go to each specific pest and then they'll have a number of pest fact sheets and outreach materials there. You can also go to the CFIA website. We have a number of fact sheets. So again, probably the easiest way to do that is to Google search CFIA and then say if you're looking for an HWA pest fact sheet, HWA pest fact sheet, and that will take you right there. Any of the landing pages for those pests on the CFIA website will take you to those resources.
Okay, I have a student from Niagara College. They are asking how they can best learn about invasive species and if invasive species informations are being implemented into education curriculums.
Oh, I certainly hope so. I don't have any direct involvement with
Yeah.
curriculum development, but I know just through outreach, we have connected with, local school boards, with the Asian longhorn beetle simulation site. We've also done some work with school boards in the Windsor area with spotted lanternfly. Um, but I think I'm going to, again, direct people to the ISC website just because, like, they have each pest listed there. So spending some time kind of reading through that website, they go really in depth because they'll include information about biology. The information on surveillance is there as well as management aspects for each of the pests.
Okay, someone is asking, it's saying that it's interesting that a lot of this work is focused on Ontario. Are there other programs present in Western provinces?
Absolutely. So our plant health program is a national program. I focused on Ontario today because the ISC is an Ontario entity, and we're focusing Ontario forest pest health today. But you can go to the CFIA website. We have an annual report that will give you results for all of Canada. So those maps will also include those results, and will give you a more national perspective of the results for this year.
Someone is interested in seeing the QR codes for the survey 123 reporting.
Okay. All right, I'm going to have to go through here. There we go. So I don't have the QR codes listed. I have the one for oak wilt. So please reach out to me and I can provide you with the other QR codes for those other pests, depending on what it is that you're interested in.
Okay. Oh, I don't have any more questions coming in. So let me just take this time out to thank Julie again for. Wait, sorry. Let me just take this time out to thank Julie Holmes again for presenting today, and thank you all for tuning in. This webinar was recorded and will be posted on our website, www.invasivespeciescenter.ca. Just a reminder to please take a couple of minutes to fill out our survey. We would really appreciate it. Up, our next webinar will be on April 16th at 10 a.m., titled Genetics and Disease Resistance in Eastern North American Trees, American Beech, Butternut, and Eastern Hemlock. So stay tuned for that. Thank you all for coming in, and we can end webinar. Okay, bye, Julie.